1, 2, 1, 2. Hi everyone. Just checking how this is actually going. I thought I'd do a different tutorial for you today. I wanted to give you something a little bit different. I just want to make sure that you can all hear me, so if you can you give me a message to know that you can hear me? I'm trying a different microphone, so I just want to make sure that it's actually working. Let me just check down here. See if I can get some comments coming up. Okay, it looks like you can hear me loud and clear. I just want to get it up on my iPad, but I'm going to take you through the recovery of Sony sensors today. I thought that I'd discuss that with you, but what I want to do is bring it up on my iPad. So let me just quit this and we'll see if I can get it up and running so I can see your questions without looking at the side monitor, which is what I want. Because I think hopefully it'll be interesting to you all. Oh, there we go, live chat's down there. Beautiful. Okay, so we'll see if a few more people can join live. I know it's incredibly late in the States. I suppose it's probably near midnight over there. Yeah, what is it over there? It's probably, well, New York obviously is 12:33 in the morning, so it's just after midnight, and Los Angeles is 9:33. So we'll just see how we go. Anyway, there might be a few Aussies watching, or you can catch up with this when we do it online. But basically what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through some tests. Now, when I shoot, one of the things that I tend to do is I'll only shoot for the highlights. Yeah, Fabian, it is. It's 12:30 p.m. It's late for you guys. But what I want to do is I want to show you how you can get away sometimes with shooting. Now, I had a specific thing in mind when I was shooting this image. I wanted to retain all of the detail in her wedding dress and also the sky. Now, this was an image that I took as the first image, so the second image wasn't this dark, but I just wanted to take you through how some of these images will be edited. So I might start with the car first and we can look at that one. So if we look at the car, now what I've done here is that I've used the area in here that I wanted to make sure that I wanted to keep the detail in the highlight area. Now this was shot in a place called a&II. It was a wedding that I just did recently. Johnny Boy said it's 5:30 a.m. in the UK. Oh boy, you're up early. Now, if you're looking at it basically here, this was shot probably around about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I was fighting the high contrast of this sun, which it's inland of Australia. It's on an area called a&II, and it's near the Murray. It's a very, very strong sun. It was really, really bright on that day. Now, I wanted to shoot the cars for the people that supplied these cars to the bride and groom. But what I wanted to do, I wanted to make sure that I didn't lose the detail in the highlight end. So what I did, basically I spot meter for the highlight. So I will put the meter exactly over the area here that you can see here. And that way I'm not blowing out any of this detail that's actually on the car itself. Now, I'm not too worried about what's happening with the shadows, because I am going to bring that back up later on, and I'll show you how I do that in Lightroom. I'm only going to use Lightroom for this work today, so I'll show you how I do that. The other thing too is if I had a really nice sky, it would have kept the detail in that sky as well. So that's the important thing. So if we click onto the develop page, what you can do is, now you'll notice all the black areas in here have been lost, but I'm not worried about that because I know I can bring it back with the sensors that Sony have, and also the Nikon ones did too. I just didn't have experience with Canon. I'm sure Canon probably could do this too, but I know that the Sony and Nikon are particularly strong with the shadow recovery. And if you do have any questions, you can actually send them to me and I'll try and answer them. Johnny Boy said my YouTube email woke him up. Sorry about that, mate. hope you find it worthwhile anyway. So what you can do for starters, if we look over here, you can see that the areas that I'm going to be dealing with are this exposure. Now these are on this section over this side over here on the right hand side. So I'm going to be looking at the exposure. I'm also going to be mostly playing with the highlight, shadows, whites and blacks. And I probably will try and do some curve work too. So I'm going to show you some curve work as well in what that I'd actually do. But what you can do to start with often is I will tend to try and grab the exposure. So what I will do here is I'll grab the exposure and I'll just start to drag that up. Now if I hold the control option and control down, that will give you a look and you can sort of see what's being affected. So basically if I take it off, you can see that the sky is overexposed. Now you can see that if I use the option and Z, because whatever comes up as being a color see-through means that you're actually affecting that or it's overexposed. So you can do it that way, but I'll just do it visually. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this exposure knob and just drag it up until I think I get a reasonable amount of recovery. Now I've still got to be careful because if you look down here, you can see that in this area I'm blowing the highlights out. All right, that whatever shows in red is actually being blown out. So that's because of this area up here. You can see that I've got that selected. You can also do that with shadows as well. If I put that on, you'd see the shadow will show up what's being lost. So at the moment I can see that I've just gone a little bit too far in the highlights. I've lost that. So I could drag it down a little bit if I wanted to. But to be honest, this is chrome. This is almost a catch light, so I'm not particularly worried about blowing that out. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to let that go a little bit, but I'm going to take the exposure up on these images until I think it's reasonable. And I'm watching all over, like I'm watching these areas over here that, you know, I'm making sure that I don't lose a detail there. Even though in this case, it's not going to matter because I'm just selling the car, but I'm still trying to show you here what I would do. And if there was clouds in the sky, you're definitely watching that they didn't blow out as well. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm just going to drag that exposure up until I'm sort of roughly happy with it. Now, then I'm going to come down here and use the shadow recovery. And you can see that I'm starting to, if I drag that right across, it will bring it up. But the thing is, as soon as you start to use shadow recovery in blacks, you are going to make it a little bit flat. And I'll look at that in the tone curve in a minute and how we correct there. But I'm just going to drag the shadows up until I get a look that I think I'm reasonably happy with, which is about there. So I've dragged both of these areas in this area up. I've dragged up the exposure to 1.3. The shadows have gone up plus 51 and the blacks have gone up plus 38. I just need to bring the clarity back too. Now, what I've got to then do is I might drag the highlights down. Now, if I did tend to make it a fraction bright, well, then what I can do then is drag the highlights down, and you'll see that the clipping now has gone in these areas. So I have got rid of that clipping that was in those areas. So make sure too, guys, if you have any questions, please ask them. If you're not watching live, because obviously it is late overseas, throw me some questions down below and we can look at that later on. So basically what I've done is I've got rid of those highlights, but again, I don't want to get rid of them totally because they're a catch light. Now, catch lights, I think you're allowed to blow out. So it's just these areas that you don't want to blow out, which are those areas that are sitting onto the car itself. I don't want to blow that out, but I don't mind if these catch lights blow out. So that doesn't bother me at all. And like I said, because we've added in shadows and blacks, obviously the image then becomes a bit flat. And I've always found that one of the good things that you can do is add a little bit of vibrance, which will bring back those greens. If you drag right up, you can see it's going really, really, really colourful. You've got to be selective on this. Just drag a fraction up. Now, the good thing with vibrance too is if you're dealing with people, it tends to protect the skin tones and just affects everything else. So that's a great thing that you can do if you want to boost overall colours with trying to protect the skin tones. You can just use the vibrance. Again, I could just add a fraction of saturation. Now, to add contrast back in, because it does, like I said, adding a bit of shadow and a bit of black does make things flat. I'll come down to here. Now, this is your tone curve, and this is a very powerful tool. What it is your highlights at this end, up here, at that top end, your mid-tones, which is around about the 50% tone, are around this end, and your shadow tone, the dark areas, are around about here. So you can just drag around. Now, one way of gaining contrast is to drag the shadows down, and then you'll actually drag up the contrast in up here in the highlights, and you'll see if the before. Oh, hang on, I've got to turn it off there. You can see there that it's given it just a little bit of a lift. And if you think that the shadows again need to be lifted a little bit more, well, obviously you can just drag a little bit under here. Now, the only other thing I probably would do is add a little bit of, especially with this, I'd add a amount of clarity until you think that it's just gone a little bit too far. So that's basically how I would edit that image. So I've recovered that image and brought it back to within what I'm quite happy with, and I think the client would love as well. So we'll leave that one. Now we'll go to something a little bit more extreme. So again, this was the one of the bride and groom I did up in the middle of central Victoria. This also it's in Moama. It's a big wine growing area. But again, I took a few of these. I actually did take these. I wanted to basically protect the sky, and also I wanted to protect Casey's dress. So I was very careful on where I exposed for the highlight on this. This was the first shot that I did. The next shot wasn't quite this dark, but I thought I'd show you a really dark image to show you how much can actually be recovered out of this. So again, if we go up to the exposure, you can see that I can drag right up back here to bring it up. Now again, I don't want to tend to go too far initially. I'm just going to do it so that I get a reasonable look overall. So I think I'm going to stop around there. And then the second that I'm happy with that, without blowing the highlights, I've got to check that these highlights down here are still being preserved. The second that I bring that, I'm going to then lift the shadows up. So I'm going to lift the shadows and lift the blacks. Now, the thing what's happened again is it's become flat again. So what I can do again is go through a similar process like before. I can add a little bit of vibrance and also a little bit of saturation. Now you can see then that the image has come back to, so it's quite colourful again. And again, I'm going to add that contrast back in. So drag down on the shadows, drag up onto the whites there. And if I find that it still needs a lift in the blacks, I still have recovery options that I can grab here. And I can even just grab a fraction more exposure as well if I want to. And you know, I've now got a file that's recovered. So even though the original image was incredibly bad, it was bad in one way, but in another way it's great because I've got all that detail in the shadow areas still in here, and I've still been able to keep the highlight area of the bride. So you know, that's been a fantastic process as well. Now we'll go to another extreme. Let's have a look at these ones. If we look at this one was shot again in it's a winery. Actually, no, it's not. It's the Over Newton Castle in Sunbury here. It's not far from my home. Again, I wanted to protect the bride. Now, she was standing in this really harsh light. It was incredibly challenging to get a shot here. Now, after this, I actually brought a flash in and I used high-speed sync, and I exposed correctly that way. But I thought I'll keep this as an example that I can show you guys that if this was what you had to do, how you can still get a file that can be recovered. Johnny Boy said, wouldn't bracketing be better? Well, yeah, it could be, Johnny, yeah. And sometimes I do bracketing. The only thing is, with bracketing, if something moves, that file is no good. And I tend to like to just get it as close as I can in one shot in the camera and then just adjust it in Lightroom. I've found with the shadow recovery of what I've got in Lightroom and Photoshop, it's never an issue if I underexpose. I wouldn't go this far, but not far off this, I'll get the result that I actually like. So yeah, you could use bracketing if you want to, but then you've got to start doing masking and bring images back in and you know, mask areas out, and it just becomes a bit cumbersome. And Arcady said, would using brushes give you the same edit? Well, yeah, it could be. It's just similar. Look, like anything, there's a million ways of doing this. I'm just showing you one way that I do it. It's more than I want to show you what you can get away with these sensors, the latest sensors, so you can sort of see, you know, how they can be recovered. But let's go through this and we'll have a look. Now, again, you can see that I've kept the detail. I've kept all of the detail down this side down here, and I've kept all the detail of the bride down this dress area down here. And that's what I wanted to keep. Like I said, this is a bit dark, and the other image that I used was better exposed, and then like I said, after that I decided to use flash. So it did come up better, but I thought we'll have a look at this and just see how far we can go. Again, I'm going to bring the exposure up. Now, I don't want to blow out. You can see if I come up too far that I'm starting to blow out all the detail in the bride's dress. So I'm just going to do it so that I'm still keeping enough detail in that area. Now, what I'm then going to do is grab the shadow slider again, and I'm going to start bringing the shadow up and also the blacks up. And I'll just grab a fraction more in exposure through here. Now, highlights then, I'm a bit unhappy with how the bride's dress looks, so I may bring the highlights down a little bit to protect those. And again, I'm going to add a bit of vibrance and also a bit of saturation to bring those nice greens back in, and that contrast again, which I tend to like to bring up because I like my images quite contrasty. And if I tend to think it needs a little bit more, well then I could probably start to use brushing and techniques like that to protect the dress and things like that in, but I'll do that as another exercise on another day. And I might add a little bit of clarity just to bring it down a little bit. Now you can see that basically how that now is a usable image. So I've now got a usable image out of an image before that was just totally, destroyed. It was no good. A few years ago, if I'd had an image like that, it couldn't have been recovered. So if you did make a mistake, you can get out of it. But to be honest, I tend to always shoot on that dark side by protecting the highlights. I meter for the highlights. And in this situation where I've stuck her in that bright sunlight, I've aimed to still know that I can bring the detail back in the shadows if I want to. I would then open this up in Photoshop, and I'd do masking to bring up this area of the building so that then could be brought up, and probably a bit of the tree, and add some detail in like that as well. But I'll show those sort of things on another day. But you can sort of see when we look at it, that we've gone from this and we've gone then up to that, which is, it's quite a usable result. So let's see what else anyone's saying. It. By the way, I'm enjoying the wedding trailers. Oh, thanks, Akadi. Yeah, I'm really enjoying doing those wedding images with the A6500. Do you know what? The A6500, the recovery is almost as good as these cameras. This was the A7R Mark II, and the car that I showed at the beginning was the A7 II. But I'm also not worried about doing the same thing with the A6500 either. Obviously, if you're doing video, you can't do that though, because you haven't got the recovery for shadows in video. You have to try and expose as close as possible, to what you're at. But yeah, I'm really, really happy with the A6500 as well. I will do another one. I'll do another one of these, and I'll try and find, or I will deliberately underexpose a couple and aim for the highlights with the A6500, and show how that can be edited as well. So that's sort of the way that I tend to shoot, and I always am shooting a little bit on the dark side. And if you follow my work, you'll notice that anyway, that you'll see that it is always sort of has a bit of a darky, edgy look to it. But that's my style, and like I said, I've put ones up about discovering your own style as well. But have a play around with that. Basically, play around with using your shadow recovery, your blacks. Don't forget to add some of that vibrance and saturation back in, and try and get used to using the tone curve, because that's a very powerful feature. You could, if you wanted to, just if I right click on that, I can say reset all, and it will take off all of those settings I've done. And you can go down to the bottom down here, and you can go linear, which means it's going to work from your straight line. But you can, if you want to, if you're a bit uncomfortable with it, is go minimum medium contrast. And you can see that it's pulled down the blacks, and it's just give a little bit of a kick in the highlight. So if you did strong contrast, you can see then that it's really pulled down these blacks and gone there. I think you can also, let me just check this. Mostly I use curves in Photoshop, but let me just reset all. I think you can even grab here and drag as well. Yes, you can. So you can just grab, what I did was I clicked on that, and then you can target certain areas. So I could come up to the blacks and and give those a bit of a kick as well. So the curves is very, very powerful. It's a very powerful tool, and it's something that you all should get used to using. It's a great tool to use. Do I have any presets? Yes, I have a million of them, but you know what? I very rarely use them. I tend to mostly just use what I've done, but I have got ones from Lindsay Adler which I use. I can't even remember what they're actually called. And the other ones I use, which are really, really good too, are Sal Cincotta has these presets called 2001 presets, which are over here. They have some really good flat presets, which if I take this off, I'll show you some of the favorite ones I use for that. Let me just click back here. Can't get that off now. Oh, there we go. I like some of these really flat presets, which are these washed out ones. If we look over here, you can see that he has these ones called washed out 1, washed out 2, washed out 3. And I like those because they give a really nice washed out effect that you can go to. That obviously that's quite extreme, but you know, some of them are really beautiful. And again, you can edit to that, but I do really like those washed out looks that he used. So I do occasionally use those. But most of the presets that I use, I have got them on here, but I tend to mostly do the stuff that I need to do in Photoshop. I'll give a general correction that I do through here, using these exposure contrasts and everything else, and then I'll go into Photoshop and edit in Photoshop because I just like the control of using all the brushes and stuff. Lightroom has them, but it's just not the same control as what Photoshop has. For instance, I'd probably try and get rid of this. Oh, where are we? There. I'd probably try and get rid of that post if it was done in Photoshop and things like that I'd be looking out for. So I'm always looking out. There's a bit on the lawn here that I'd get rid of. You can do that in Lightroom, but it just doesn't work as well. So yes, I have got presets, just very rarely use them, that's all. But yeah, so I thought, well, that's it. Any questions before I go? There's a few that you've got there, but like I said, if you're watching this, obviously because it's so late over there, leave some questions down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I'm going to start doing a number of these sort of things to show how I edit and work and my streamline of what I do and things like that, which might really help you guys learn as well. And it'll be a great thing, I think, for all of us. And like I said, you're always learning, you never stop learning. So we'll do that together, and I'll start showing my Lightroom workflow and my Photoshop workthrough and things like that as well. So any questions, guys, before we go? If not, I'll call it a day, let a few of you go to bed, or a few of you just getting up to have breakfast. Which lenses are your favourite? Ivan said which lenses are your favourite for the a6500? To be honest, the 24 1.8 is my favourite. That's the favourite lens that I'm using. It's also the lens that I'm using now on the a6500 now that I'm using to film me right behind the computer there. That, like I said before, my favourite is the 35mm focal length. That's full frame I'm talking about. So that's why I love the 24 1.8 the best. It's just beautiful. I love that lens to death. That's probably my favourite. If I'm travelling, I like the 18 to 105, which I've put a few videos on about my New Zealand travels and stuff like that. That I love that lens as well. But definitely, if I'm talking about one lens, which is my favourite lens of all, it's that one. It's the 24 1.8, and I also like the Zeiss Batis on it as well. I love that focal length. It's beautiful too. Most people are just saying thanks for sharing my knowledge. It's a pleasure, guys. That's why I'm here. Not many people know, but I do come from a teaching background. It's one thing. I taught at university for 20 odd years at a high-end university here called RMIT. I taught Photoshop since version 1. So I am very strong in Photoshop and things like that. So I love the teaching aspect of it. Even though I'm a full-time wedding photographer, I do miss the teaching side of it. So I love that now, to be able to pass knowledge on. And that's why I'm starting to do this for you all, because I do really enjoy teaching. I miss it sometimes, and that's why I like to give this to you. So that'll be about it. Well, we'll call it a day there because it's probably going to keep going a little bit too long. But so we'll end it there, and I'll have another video up soon, and I'll talk again soon. So bye for now, guys.